Welcome back to Half-Assed Garage. This is part 2 on how to do a tilt front clip on a square body. You can see my battery tray here, just a jerry can holder, bolted through the firewall because I'm not running a heater or anything. And I have some angled shelf supports underneath to also make up for the weight because I'm running an Optima blue top to make it easy to turn over that big block. Ignore the wires, they're a little messy because I'm basically rewiring it from scratch. I'm getting everything mocked up, lined up where I want it, and then it's going to be cleaned up, secured, safe, and out of the way. So ignore that for now. Also count on doing that yourself. Back to the front clip now. Where we left off, I told you how to mount the bottom halves. Now they're nice and secure where you want them. See how clean that line is on this side? So at this point, your front clip is still secured with the brace across. Now, I set it back on with the core support just resting on the frame. And then the top half, I basically secured it back like normal. I lined up this side how I wanted it, got the gaps looking clean, got it where I wanted it. It's basically just resting on this and this. Put the bolt in that top ear. Mount it to it so it holds it steady. I cut mine off eventually, but for now you leave it on and holding it in place one side at a time, obviously, because you only need to move the core support up and down a couple inches to mock things up and get your hinges in there and everything. And in another video I'll go over the hinges that I used. I can't tell you how to find them because I just got them from a random store locally, but you may want to find the same hinges because the ones that I used made it so you didn't need a bunch of spacers. I just put one plate on top of the supports for the core support. I just got it kind of level, and then I just tacked everything in, and that's what we're about to go over now. As soon as I close this clip. Alright, at this point, I just used a floor jack and a scrap of 2x4. There's that piece that I was mentioning bent over, but you can remove. So just 2x4 scrap and a floor jack. And where I started was just centering the core support onto the frame, getting it where I wanted. And then I had my hinges and my plate. I just had a piece of plate steel cut to go from the inside frame all the way to the outer edge of the support. You may want to do things differently here. So I use these hinges because I mentioned they have a gap in them when closed. And you can see that gap whenever looking at everything and setting it down. I used literally the nut that held the bushings and the core support onto the frame and everything. And I just set the nut in there because it was about the perfect size to keep that gap in the hinge. And we don't need it anymore, but so I set the plate on here, then the hinge, and I tried to line up my hinge with this piece of the core support because it's like the heaviest, it's the thickest point, and it's obviously the best place to support the weight because that's where it was on its own, running down to the frame here. So that's where I chose to support it because it had the most material to weld to and the best support for the weight. So like I said, I lined up the hinge edge with the edge of that part of the core support. I just set the hinge out enough to give just enough movement for clearance and all that. Not too far, but just enough. Also, you'll notice the hinge, I ground the head of the pin off, the stock pin, and I'm using a nut and a bolt. So when you go to remove the whole clip, you just remove the bolt, then the hinge will separate. At this point, you're using your jack to raise it, lift it, whatever, get it lined up where you want it. And I use like a screwdriver, whatever, to pry it up, get the hinge lined up where you want it, and then get the edge of the hinge that's mounting to the core support right where you want it, and then just tack one spot on each side. That way it's held right where you need it. The bottom half of the hinge won't be flopping around, it'll stay relatively level. And then your bracket and the bottom portion of your hinge, you just want to get it level and in place. So now that your top half is tacked, and kind of like play with this bracket that it's sitting flat on and the bottom part of the hinge, get it kind of level. Start with this flat piece that's still on the bottom. Once you get those all level and kind of lined up, I did the same thing on the bottom with the hinge where I gave it some space. Then just tack a corner here, tack one spot over here, then tack your hinge to that plate. That's really all I did for that part. Just a little bit of patience and lining it up, playing with it, looking at it, considering things getting in the way. Then I'll move on to this part. Also, for those of you that notice my LED headlights, those are just from a Jeep Cherokee. They fit right in using the stock rings. I'll mention that in another video if people give a crap. This is something to remember. While you're tilting, there's nothing stopping that thing from coming all the way down. I had this 2x4 here to take the weight. Now I'm planning on doing a handle, some kind of hood ornament that will support the weight so you can pull it open and close. This is, of course, easier to do if you have a helping hand. As you can see me struggling, I did not have that. All right. Once you get those hinges, those brackets tacked into place, then you can just open it. Do a fairly good tack job though, because you don't want it breaking loose, because it's pretty heavy, even without the hood. You got that supported. Now you can come in here and you can permanently weld everything into place. Welded that plate to the frame, all around the hinge, and that's basically the majority of it. So now, once your hinges are done being welded, fabricated, whatever you're doing here, then you move on to your hood. So once again, I brought the fenders down because that was all welded up, and in preparation for the hood, I just had the fenders setting where I wanted them to be. I didn't bother to bolt it down at this point because you don't want to bolt it down, mount the hood, and then you can't unbolt this. So at this point you can cut off those ears if you want, or you can do it after you do the hood. It doesn't matter. So with the fender sitting in place, preferably with the buddy, set the hood into place. And I didn't bother to remove either the spring or the hood latch, the hook. In my opinion, if everything holding that hood on failed to hold it, at least that hook would be there to catch it if you're going down the freeway and the wind grabs it. So with the hood in place, back down with you, I started at the front to get the lines clean, because this is all more sturdy, everything flexes less. Started with one side with a drill and screws, just drilled a hole through the core support and into that lip of the hood while pushing it forward to get it right in the place I want. So then just put a screw in, and then the screw starts to suck the hood down and get that line right where you want it, the right height, the right gap. And I did one just left of the headlight, one center, and one just on the other side of that headlight. And once that's done, then I moved to the back where I tacked it while pushing the fender in on the top part to get the gap that you want. You don't want it in that close. I'm going to have to like move that out a little bit because it tends to catch there. So keep that in mind. You might want to flare this out just enough when you're opening this on your own. It doesn't catch on the frame there. But you get it kind of lined up, lean on it, hold it into place. You get your hood gap. Don't worry about this. This is just a half-ass tack job. I'm going to clean this all up later. Just grind a little bit of paint off. I use a drill with a wire wheel on it to just quickly get the paint off. Give me some surface area to do a quick tack. Did one there. I had little pieces of spare steel from where I'd cut off other stuff, just scrap. And I set it down in between. You have this like rubber thing that the hood sits on. I set that middle piece, the scrap, on top of that, kind of at diagonal, so you have something to fill that large gap, and just welded to it on each side. Fill in the gap around it. Did that on one side, and came around, did the same thing on the other, and you can see I've got a pretty clean line. And that edge is pretty level on both sides. The hood edge is pretty square on with the core support also. One thing I will mention, you may have difficulty putting your grill back on. So you may want to put your grill on before you attach your hood like this. You may have to wait till after, because keep in mind, to attach your grill up to the core support and everything, you are going to have a whole tilt in leaning forward, and you have this whole opening in here to reach up and screw things together. So probably going to have to do it afterward. I'm running into this shit as I go. I'm running a Phantom grill, if anyone wants to know. I also don't mind, I have no bed floor. I chose to run without one. And that's everything I have so far. Next issues I have to work out are some kind of clip to lock the clip down, some kind of latch system. The weight itself should be enough to hold it down, unless the only scenario I can think of where it wouldn't be heavy enough to keep it down is if you were having the thing towed and it was backwards on the tow truck. Apart from that, I think the weight would be enough alone. But I'm going to put a latch anyway. So there's that next. Next is a quick release plug and the wiring harness. And some kind of like rubber gap, gasket thing, whatever, to put on the metal edges where you did the cut. Make it look nice and clean. And then also cutting the front edges off the frame mounting the bumper to the core support so they move together and nothing hits. And I guess I'll also do another video with the upgrades I did, such as the LED headlights and all that crap. There you have it. Next up, I will do a video on parts, tools, supplies, stuff like that. Thank you.